Good evening, and welcome to the Porch. I'm here to guide you on your journey through the complex world of relationships. Can we cue some music, please? From our friendships to our romantic endeavors, we'll explore our family bonds, estranged relationships, work dynamics, and perhaps even the relationship with oneself. So how do we relate? To answer this, we'll look to Scripture and find exactly what God has to say about our relationships. This is, after all, the relationship series.
All right. Porch, how we doing? We doing okay tonight? Yeah? It's great to see you. Special shout out to Porch Live, everybody that's tuning in online. Like, we don't take it for granted that you would be here with us this evening. And listen, I've said this before, just talking to those of you online. We genuinely believe that God can meet with anyone at any time and in any place, and that includes you right where you are. So we believe, man, like God's got something special for those of you here in the room, but he's also got something special in store for you as well. Special shout out to Porch Live, Midland, Dayton, and Indianapolis. Well, I'll never forget showing up to Texas A&M as a freshman. All right. We love the rest of you too. It was my first time moving to a new city, which brought a few new realities to me. You know, like I was showing up into an environment where I had more freedom than I had ever known before. No one knew me at all, which meant I could reinvent myself entirely. And because no one knew me at all, it meant I had no friends yet. And so as I make my way to College Station, I see my brother and I'm like, hey man, like I need to get plugged in. Like it's important for me to kind of get my feet settled, begin to put roots down and feel like I can spread myself around and meet other folks. And so how is it that I do this in a brand new town? And he looked at me and said, man, well, there's this thing that happens at the student center where all of the organizations on campus gather together and it's the perfect place to meet people. And I thought, perfect, like that's exactly what I want. This is gonna be a group of people, freshmen just like me, that have no friends, that are showing up. They're trying to find those that they'll do life alongside and they can call their forever buddies into the future. So let's do it, this sounds perfect. So I make my way to this event. And as I get to this open house, what I find awaiting me there at the front door is something the likes of which I did not expect. I found more than 800 student organizations, little communities of people that were all vying to bind themselves together. And in the time since, I think it's north of 1,000 at this point, which told me a few things about the human race. You know, as I consider the organizations there amongst that event, I saw the usual suspects. I saw your sororities and your fraternities and your business organizations, the engineering clubs, and all your student government groups. I saw the usual suspects, and I also saw the not so usual suspects. I saw the undergraduate beekeepers society. I saw the live action role playing enthusiasts. I even saw the happiness club, you know, which I almost slipped an application in for because that sounds like a good time. There was a wide variety of people all gathered together seeking after the same thing. You see, despite our varying differences, and some of us have some differences, what I noticed in that moment is everyone is looking for someone because everybody wants to be connected. Everybody wants to be connected. Author Sebastian Junger said, human beings need 3 basic things in order to be content. They need to feel competent at what they do, they need to feel authentic in their lives, and they need to feel connected to others. These values are considered intrinsic to human happiness, and they far outweigh extrinsic values such as beauty, money, and status, which interestingly are kind of the crux of the young adult experience. And yet what he just said is more important than your appearance and your success and your reputation. What's more important than any of that is your connection to other people. We need each other. You know it, I know it, and God knows it. It says so in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. It says 2 are better than 1 because they have good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Burr. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So the question is not, do we need each other? The question instead is, how do we relate to each other? Because the reality of it is, all of us, as we navigate life, are gonna find ourselves in a variety of different relationships. Some of you right now, you're investing in deep friendships, those lifelong friends that you anticipate standing next to you on your wedding day. Others of you are working on that wedding day. Like you're dating that romantic interest and you're spending considerate time and you're trying to thoughtfully learn about them. And the closest thing to a romantic relationship some of you have is the relationship to your job, right? And so you're spending all of your time sitting in your office, grinding away for the man. All of us, regardless of what relationship you're engaged with, are engaging in some kind of relationship. And so the question then is, how do we relate to them all? That's what this series is about. That's what we wanted to unpack over the course of the next several weeks. We wanted to help you understand, how is it that we as human beings are meant to connect to each other? And tonight we're cracking the lid on that relationship, which has brought so many of you here into this room right now. Friendship. That's what we're talking about this evening. In case you didn't see it, we're talking about friends. That's where we're going. I want to give you a theology of friendship. And the way that I want to do it is I want to walk through it in 3 different sections. I want to talk to you about, why does friendship matter? How does friendship grow? And what does friendship look like? So why does friendship matter? Well, C.S. Lewis said that friendship is unnecessary. It's like philosophy and it's like art. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things that gives value to survival. I was doing some research because I was curious. What is the average first age which we find our very first friendship? Like, what is the age? And when you do the research, what you see is that it's 3 to 4 years old, which ratifies everything CS just said. Because at 3 to 4 years old, you're not relying on the friends in your life to help you survive. You've got your parents for that. And even if you did rely on your peers at that point, they wouldn't do much of any good for you, right? No, why then, at such an early age, are we pursuing friendship? Why does friendship matter? For this reason, life isn't meant to be endured, it's meant to be enjoyed. Life isn't meant to be endured, it's meant to be enjoyed. And listen, some of you are here tonight, and that's the truth that God wanted to give to you, because all you've been doing is enduring. Like, you're just trying to get through the day. You're just trying to make it through the week, and God's saying, son, daughter, I have more for you than that. I have more. And friends help with this reality. If you think about it, God doesn't primarily give you friends for your development. He has his church for that. God doesn't primarily give you friends for your accountability, because he has community for that. He doesn't primarily give you friends for your godliness, because he has his word for that. Now, he uses friends for all of those things. Do not mistake what I'm saying. Friends absolutely help with everything I just described. But friends are not predominantly nor primarily intended to those ends. So what reason then does God primarily intend for us to have friends in life? Joy. Joy. Which just says something really awesome about God, right? That he would look upon us and he would say, I not only in care for you to exist, I not only care for you to survive, I want you to thrive. Like, I want you to enjoy everything that I have. And I've given you some friends, some people, some peers that you can enjoy as well. Proverbs 27:9 says, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. God is so for you. He is so for you that he is for your satisfaction in life, that he created a relationship that principally exists for your enjoyment. Something that Cambridge Dictionary agrees with vehemently. It defines a friend as a person who you know well and who you like a lot, but who is usually not a member of your family, which I think is a really funny addition, right? Like, they can't be a part of your family, according to Cambridge. We can agree to disagree on that, talk about it later, but what Cambridge is pointing to is that these are people who you like a lot. And remarkably, we agree with this. I was looking at a research study done by Pew Research Center that just October of last year, they were assessing the state of friendship here in America, and what they found is they polled those who agreed to having at least one close friend, which is like 91% of people. It's the vast majority of people say, man, I've at least got one close friend. As they were doing their poll, what they found is that 72%, so 3 out of 4 of people, 72% of those that agreed to having a close friend said they were deeply satisfied with at least one of those friends. Deeply satisfied. And as I read that data, I was like, maybe I don't need to do this talk. Like, it seems like friendships are great. Things are going well. Until I kept doing research and I found that in the lives of 18 to 34-year-olds, 30% of you, so just a third of this room, also attest to experiencing loneliness every day or at least several times a week. Which is deeply concerning when you consider the effects of loneliness in the life of a person, because according to the CDC, loneliness has been linked to an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, depression, anxiety, addiction, dementia, and even early death. One meta-analysis of 70 different studies found that the effects of loneliness on one's longevity in life had the same impact as severe obesity and smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And some of you here tonight are really lonely. Like, some of you here tonight are in fact here tonight because you're looking to cure and curb your loneliness. You're trying to find friends. Let me just say, I just want to speak to those of you here that would identify with everything I just described. One, we're really glad you're here. You're in the right spot. This is a great place to find friends. But I also know that some of you have been here before, and you have made the effort, and you have extended a hand, and you've introduced yourself already, and yet it doesn't seem like you can find any friends in this place, and that can be so very frustrating. To you, I want to say, do not lose hope. Would you come talk to us? And then thirdly, the way you find friends is by being a friend. That's the greatest advice I could give to you. And we've got a lot more that we want to talk about on the topic of friendship, but I just wanted to say that briefly. So what's my point with all of this? The idea that many of us would say, I'm deeply satisfied with my friends, and I'm so lonely at the same time. What is the point? Like, why do I make all of this space to talk about this right now? Because I think it's helpful for us to set up the fact that many of us are living in what the Bible would describe as essentially an impossible situation. Because friendship is the presence of meaningful connection, while loneliness is the absence of meaningful connection. To say you're living in both at the same time is to say that your experience is an oxymoron, that somehow you're alone and yet you're still together. It doesn't make any sense. And so we need to grasp hold of what then is our misunderstanding of friendship, because God wants more for us. Like, the reason which we can say I'm deeply connected and I'm deeply alone is because we don't quite understand what God means by friendship when he begins to unpack it. And so that's what I want us to walk through. I want us to grasp hold of what God says should be socially true of those that engage with the friends in their life. And here's the thing. This idea of friendship, that man, maybe we got something wrong. We would honestly agree with this. Like, just think about the way that you talk about friends in your life. Like, this is a word that we just kind of throw around. We just kind of lay it upon any and every person in our sphere of influence, so much so that we even have begun to qualify the types of friends in our life. That we have best friends, and we have close friends, and we have work friends, and we have family friends, and we have friends that we see every now and again, and that person's just a friend. I remember when I was in college, I was dating a girl. I met her family, and she introduced me as a good friend. That told me everything I needed to know in the moment. I knew immediately where we stood. Like, I don't need to be your boyfriend, but can we at least get we're very close friends, mom and dad. You know, like, that would have been great, would have been extremely edifying, and yet the point still remains that we do this because we well know that not every friendship contains the same depth of intimacy or commitment as another. And while casual friends, they're inevitable and they're good, they can even be joy-filled, my thing that I want you to grasp tonight is I fear that we have lost a deep level of intimacy and intentionality that God intends for you to have with the friends in your life. The Bible even says that we have a discrepancy with the types of friendships we experience. It says in Proverbs 18:24, a man of many companions comes to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Like it's possible to have many companions, literally a whole company of friends and still come to ruin. And some of you get this. Like you've invested deeply into the friendships of your life and yet you've been betrayed by something someone did or you've been slandered by something someone said. Some of you are so desperate, so desirous of that group of people that the cost to admission is moral compromise, not just one time, not just two times, but every single time. Your many companions has brought you to ruin, and yet the Bible is sitting here. God is sitting here and he's saying, I have more for you. There's something better than that. There's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. There's a friend that's closer than even blood. So how then do we build that kind of friendship? How do we grow that kind of friendship? Well, the Hebrew word for friend in that verse in Proverbs 18:24 is the word ahava. When it says there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother, friend is the word ahava. Say it with me, ahava. And what it means when it says it throughout the Old Testament is it's talking about love. And the thing about ahava is it's a particular kind of love. Like it's a general sort of affection, and yet what you know about ahava is that it is always an invisible affection that becomes visible action. So just to help you grasp this, when I was in college, not to just keep telling college stories, but when I was in school, I thought that I wanted to study accounting, which makes no sense knowing myself today. I don't know why I would choose to do that. I've always been horrible at math. It doesn't make any sense that I would ever sign up for that. But at the time, it made perfect sense because if you looked at the accounting program, it was really good. If you looked at their job placement, it was really great. And if you looked at the earning potential, bing, like that sounds awesome. I would love to make the kind of money those people make. And so I thought accounting was exactly what I wanted to do. The only thing is I hated it. I hated learning it. I hated studying for it. I hated testing for it. So while the idea of accounting was something I loved, I had no ahava for it. It did not change the way that I lived my life. True, deep biblical friendship has ahava. And the reason we know that is because we see it in the story of Jonathan and David in 1 Samuel chapter 18. So if you have a Bible, you can turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 18. This is really where we're gonna be over the course of the remainder of the evening. We're gonna look at a bunch of different scriptures. We'll have them up on the screens for you. But we're gonna look at kind of 18, 19, 20. We'll jump to 23 at one point. So if you just put your finger there, we'll be able to track along with the rest of the message. But everything we've done up to this point is set up, which freaks some of you out because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. We've been into this thing for 18 minutes already and you're just now getting into the meat of your message. Calm down. You're gonna be okay, all right? Your friends will still be here by the end of this thing, Lord willing. What I want us to do is I want us to look at the Bible's greatest example of true friendship. Next to Jesus' friendship to you and I, Jonathan and David have the best case for us to study. And so what I want us to look at their friendship and learn for our own. And so it says this in 1 Samuel chapter 18, picking it up in verse 1. It says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. So how do friendships grow? The deeper the conviction, the deeper the connection. The deeper the conviction, the deeper the connection. It's easy to read this and just assume, man, Jonathan and David, they're close. Okay, move on, turn the page, let's keep going. And yet what we need to understand is this is a very unlikely friendship. Like these guys are not from the same spheres of influence. Like one of them was raised in royalty while the other was raised in poverty. One had white collar parents. The other came from a blue collar crowd. One of them only knew popularity while the other lived in obscurity. One of them learned within the palace's own walls while the other picked up his tools of the trade from the field around. Like they were absolute opposites. And yet what we see is this unlikely friendship has a really unbreakable bond. Like when the Hebrew says that they were knit to one another, The word there literally means they were chained to one another. Like there was an unbreakable force that united the two of these guys to one another. Why is that? Like why does that happen for these two? Because they had an abnormal affection and an uncommon commitment to the things of God. They had an abnormal affection for the things of God. They loved God in a way that was abnormal to the rest of the world. Like when people would look at them, they would say, man, just dictated by the evidence of your life, you love God like you wouldn't believe. That is crazy. But they also had an uncommon commitment. They were uncommon in the way that they would faithfully follow whatever it was that God wanted them to do. They had an abnormal affection and an uncommon commitment to the things of God. We see it in their origin story. Like if you turn to 1 Samuel 14, we get the first real account of Jonathan's life, and what we see is everything I just described. Like him and his armor bearer, they see the enemies of God, the Philistines, and what they decide is to climb some cliffs and lay siege to a garrison, which was stupid. Like that's a suicide mission. Like a garrison was a defensive military outpost that was established to protect conquered enemy territory. And what we see from the story is as they make their way up, the garrison sees them. They're like, hey guys, we see there's two of you. We're a select defensive fighting force. Yeah, we know, man. Can we come up? For sure. All right, yeah, that sounds great. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. And yet, Jonathan said, if they call us up, then the Lord has given them into our hand. Let us go up then. And so he and his armor bearer, they ascend, and it says that he kills 20 Philistines, and they lay siege to the garrison. And with a little help from God, who throws in an earthquake, the entire Philistinian army panics. And it's something like 30,000 to 600 between the Philistines and the Israelites win. David has a similarly insane story. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, you see he goes up against a guy by the name of Goliath, the Philistinian champion. We won't get into all the details of Goliath, but he was a big bad. And David steps up when no one else would, and with but a sling and a stone, he drops him without even using his 4 other bullets. Like these two guys, they were willing to risk everything, including their very own lives, because they so believed in God. They believed big in God. And so they wanted to do whatever it took to live their lives in a way where that abnormal affection and that uncommon commitment drove them not just forward, but eventually together. Like that's what we see. What we learn is the bedrock of their belief in God, the bedrock of their belief became the bedrock of their bond to one another. I love the way author Dr. Kent Hughes says it. He says a Christian friendship exceeds anything that exists in the world. For such a friendship is founded on a supernatural mutuality of soul. The Holy Spirit makes your souls chorus the same cries. You assent to the same authority. You know the same God. You're going the same way. You long for the same things. You dream mutual dreams. You yearn for the same experiences of holiness and worship. You know when this happens. And this is wonderful. I remember another college story, my junior year, deciding to join a business organization. Admittedly, I did not join the organization because I was looking for friends. I joined the organization because I wanted to pad my resume. Like I was arriving at the end of my college tenure and I thought, okay, I need to begin to prepare myself to have some credibility as a candidate for future jobs. Like as I walk the stage and I make my way out and I step into the real world, I want to look the part, earn the role, and be okay. And so I joined this organization with no intent to find friends. And yet as I got into the organization, I met a group of guys, and they too were there because they wanted to add to their resume, but more so than that, they wanted to add to the family of God. And as we just sat together and we got to know one another and we shared stories of God's goodness in my life, like, man, like this is what God has done for me. Oh no, he did the same thing for you. No way. Like we just began to share ourselves with one another. What we found is that as our love for God was expressed, our love for one another exploded. This is why it's really powerful when you share your testimony with another person. because they're gonna see in you a love for God, and they're gonna see in themselves a love for God. And oh my gosh, man, like this is the making of something really special, and you're gonna find friendship, you know? That was my experience with these guys. Like I found friends when I wasn't looking for friends, and they just weren't any kind of friend. They were best friends to me, the very friends that stood even at my own wedding. And the reason I tell you that is to just exhort the fact that there's great power and potency in sharing your personal relationship to God with someone else. That when you have deep convictions, it'll lead to deep connections. Now, let me be really clear. Am I saying that you shouldn't befriend people of different religious backgrounds? No, obviously that's not what I'm saying. But I do want to sit here and I just very briefly want to say, it is important for you to know that you will descend to greater depths and you'll ascend to greater heights and you'll find a richer experience of friendship because it will be true friendship if you invest with believers. It's not either or, it's both and. But if you look at your sphere of influence, the circles you run in, and you don't see anybody else that loves God, then something's off and you're robbing yourself of the kind of joy that God wants to give. And so this is a good place for you to say, I'm gonna get connected tonight. I'm gonna figure out what it looks like to plug in. Like I do want to continue to walk within my spheres of influence and the circles I have, but I also want to step into the types of friendships God wants to give because there's more of him in those spaces. John says it like this in 1 John. He agrees at this point. He says, beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God because God is love. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us and his love is perfected in us. What perfects true love, true friendship? It's not gonna be superficial similarities. That we have the same hobbies in common. We like the same kinds of music. We love to travel together. It's not gonna be superficial similarities. And it's not gonna be a shared disdain for seclusion. I'm so alone. You're so alone. You wanna be alone together? It will be neither of those things. No, what you need is you need deep substance. And substance is found in the Spirit. It's found in the person of Christ. And so you come to him, and as you come to him, you'll find them. I promise. So here's what you need to know. When you step into these kinds of relationships, when you find this sort of friendship, it looks so wildly different than the rest of the world might expect. And what I wanna do for the remainder of our time is I wanna get really practical. So if you're like, okay, I'm ready to learn. I want to know how this is supposed to impact my life. This is the moment. So pull your pen, pop the top, and take some notes. Because I wanna tell you what friendship is supposed to look like. And as we go, I'm gonna give you 4 things. The first thing that you need to know is a true friend is loyal. A true friend is loyal. We see this in the story of David and Jonathan. If we jump back into chapter 18 and we look at 3 and 4, we see it says, then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Again, he loved him. He had an ahavah for David as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and he gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. Literally the guy gives him the clothes off of his back. He looks at David and he says, I'm so for you that I'm gonna give you my robe, which is a sign of my provision. I'm gonna give you my armor, which is a sign of my protection. Where you go, I go. What you face, I face. What you deal with, I deal with. I'm yours. We're bound to one another. My loyalty lies with you. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks, who clings, who grasps closer than a brother. Like loyal friends, they stick to you. They don't bail on you. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. True friends, they don't run out when the going gets tough. Like it doesn't matter how inconveniencing or uncomfortable or overwhelming the situation may be, they hang in there. Like they don't come up with weak excuses whenever you ask for their help. They don't choose to abandon you just because you've become a momentary inconvenience. They don't forfeit the friendship just because y'all have fallen on tough times. Like this is not the way that loyal friends operate. Loyal friends say, come hell or high water, I'm in it with you. I will charge the gates of hell alongside of you. Like, I will race into whatever's ahead, whatever God intends with you in the heights and in the depths. I'm yours. That's what loyal friends say. They hang in there. They lean in. They don't run out. They don't give way when others would. Earlier this year, I called one of my friends who runs an irrigation business. I was here in Dallas already. Winter weather was coming to my home in Houston. Brooke was there. And we needed to prepare the house. Like, things had happened earlier in that year where the weather had gotten bad and pipes had busted. And so I was like, man, we need to turn the water off. And so I called my buddy. I was like, hey man, can you swing through and just get our house prepared? He's like, of course I can do that. It's such a simple ask. That is until Brooke sends me a picture hours later of this good friend of mine covered in mud and standing in a hole and plumbing pipes, like parts all around him. And yet he never told me about it. And as I stared at that photo, a picture, a literal image of a massive problem in my family's life, I also saw the sweet reality of a loyal friend that stood at the dead center of it. Do you have a friend like that? Are you a friend like that? We all need people that are loyal, not people that dodge the difficult, but people that dive right into it. The second thing you need to know is a true friend is honest. If we jump to chapter 19, what you need to know between 18 to 19 is Saul, King Saul, begins to grow insidiously jealous of David, so much so that he wants to take David's life. And so it says this, and Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I'll tell you. Talk about some difficult news to relate to your friend. Hey man, this is kind of hard to explain. I'm not sure how to break it to you, but my father sort of wants you dead. Like, that's a hard piece of news to deliver to a friend. And yet Jonathan loves his friend so much that he's willing to brave the difficult conversation. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Proverbs 28:23 says, whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. You see, good friends don't conceal the truth to provide a false sense of security. That's not good friendship. That's not kind. Like, no one likes to learn that they have food in their teeth. But everyone hates to learn that they've had food in their teeth for a long time. It is better to be honest and upfront than to conceal the truth to preserve their feelings. It's better for you to be truthful with them. And yet, what we know is there's a way we should be truthful. Like, am I saying that because you should be honest, you should see it, you should say it, that you gotta give it faster, they get it faster? No, the Bible's not saying that either. Proverbs 16:24 says, gracious words are a honeycomb. They're sweet to the soul. They're healing to the bones. Are your words sweet when you speak them? Do they taste like honey? Do people delight to hear from you and return for even more? Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Like, there's a way to speak that sharpens one another, but there's also a way to speak that dulls one another. Like, how do you sharpen a blade? Like, when I heard this, I thought, okay, like it sounds like the chef at the Japanese steakhouse who's like working the knives against each other, like he's getting them ready. And yet when you study blacksmithing in the Iron Age, which I don't know if you do that, I did that for you, so don't worry. You can rest assured that I'm giving you accurate information. What you learn is that's not how they sharpened blades. You don't sharpen blades with other sharp blades. You sharpen blades with an iron file. And the way that you do it is you take a blade and you carefully and skillfully work it across resistance until it grows sharper. You see, the process of giving feedback, if iron in fact sharpens iron, means it should be careful. It should be considerate. That's how we should speak. We should speak honestly with one another, yes, but we should sharpen with skill. So we pay attention not just to the words we say, but we pay attention to the way we say those words. And some of you need to know, like, you give some thought to the things you're gonna say, you should give even more thought to the way you're going to say it. And it also means that we don't just speak whatever it is we need to share whenever we have the time. It also means we speak whatever we need to say whenever they have the time to process it. Like, that's kindness. We want clarity, but we want kindness. Like, we want to be truthful in our honesty, yet we want to be skillful in our delivery. Because a true friend is honest. A true friend is trustworthy. 1 Samuel chapter 20, if you jump down to 12 verses 13, it says, "And Jonathan said to David, 'The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father, when I've listened to him about this time tomorrow or the third day, behold, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also if I don't disclose it to you and send it your way, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father.'" Like, in the face of David's growing fear, as Saul continually pursued his life, we see Jonathan, his dear friend, interceding between the two of them. He continues to stand in the gap. And because he cares so much about David, in this passage, he looks at me and says, "Yeah, my father is going to pursue you. I'm going to learn what it is that he's thinking, and then I'm going to tell you. You can trust that I'm going to tell you, so much so that I'm willing to subject myself to God's judgment and the consequences thereof if I do not remain faithful to my oath." That's how trustworthy you can count me, because a true friend is trustworthy. And we all need friends like this. Like, we need someone that we can open up to about the worst things happening in our life. At the very beginning of that chapter, you see David is in a panic, and he's just telling Jonathan, "Man, things are horrible. Like, your dad is seeking to take my life." And Jonathan is such a trusted place of confidence that he can receive all that David says. He can help him to process it in truth, and then he can send him out to engage it wisely. Do you have a friend like that? Someone that's trustworthy? We all need one. Like, we need a friend that can hear the very worst parts of ourselves, that we can process with honestly, that we can wrestle with the difficulties of life alongside. I have a friend like this in Houston, Texas. Like, when I first made my way to Houston, I was dealing with a bunch of circumstantial trouble. Things at my job were hard, things in my marriage were difficult, and I was wrestling for probably the first time in my life with some depression, and I was like, man, I just need to be able to process this stuff in a safe place. And so I grabbed a friend that I could begin to share these things with in an undivisive way. And as I began to process with him, what I found is he was deeply safe, but he was also honest. He would speak to me the things that I needed to know, and then he would help me to correct course and resume well. You need a friend like that. You need someone that's trustworthy. And when you find them, you don't let them go. Like, I've made my way here to Dallas. He's still in Houston, and we talk every single Friday. We hop on the phone and we continue to process together because he's someone safe that I can confide in. Proverbs 13:20 tells us, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise." So be careful who you pick. But the companion of fools will suffer harm. Like, you want to pick people that when you deposit confidential information, something that is needed for their safekeeping, they don't turn around and tell it to others. Like, you want to be able to open up to someone and then them not open it up to everybody else. That's not what you want. I don't want to tell you my news and then that becomes your news to share. That's not a good friend. That's not what you're supposed to do. Now, let me be very clear. This is not a license to gossip against other people. And it's not a license to grumble against God either. A lot of Christians, in the spirit of processing, will sit behind closed doors and talk about other people and complain behind their backs. That is not what we're talking about right here. What we're talking about is creating an environment where you can, as Job described, offer words for the wind, receive proper correction, and then move forward in godliness. That's what you want. Proverbs 12:26 says, one who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. We don't want to lead others astray. So we need to carefully consider what we're sharing with our friends. So here's a way that I do it. How do I consider what it is that I'm sharing with the people in my life? If you just want a really helpful filter to follow, I consider, is it true? If it is, then is it kind? And if it is it necessary? If whatever it is, I or you need to share, if it fails one of those tests, do not share it. We want to speak things that are true and kind and necessary. Proverbs 11:13 says, whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps things covered. Can you keep things covered? Or are you always talking about other people? Number 4, and lastly, a true friend is self-sacrificing. A true friend is self-sacrificing. 1 Samuel chapter 23, we read this. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. Are you catching the pattern? David was in the wilderness of Ziph and Horish, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and he went to David at Horish, and he strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father knows all of this. This is the last interaction that we have recorded between Jonathan and David. The next time we see Jonathan, he's slain on the battlefield, and David grieves the loss of his friend. What's so interesting about this is the first open acknowledgement, not personal acknowledgement, but the first open acknowledgement of Jonathan that his rightful claim to the throne of his father is not in fact his own. Instead, it belongs to that of his friend. Like, this isn't a friend that's jealous of his pal. Like, he's not envious that he's getting ahead. He's not trying to hold him back so he can snake by. This is not the nature of a self-sacrificing friend. Instead, it's one that not only acknowledges what's happening, but endorses it. He's like, man, you're the rightful king. And so I'm gonna do whatever I can to make way for you to sit where God wants you to sit. It was his throne. Like, he was set up to belong, like to sit on it, to take over for his father. And yet he so loves God, and he so loves his friend, and he so trusts the plans of redemption that he says, man, I'm just a part of what God's doing in the world. And so I'll get out of the way if you sitting there means this thing moves forward. And so some of you Christians in the room, you have harbored bitterness and jealousy and comparison and even hate towards your Christian brothers and sisters because God has, for whatever reason, put them on the throne. Listen, your future and their future is not your own. It's no longer you who lives, it's Christ who lives in you. And he gets to do whatever the heck he wants to do. Jonathan gets it, and it makes him self-sacrificing. Are you self-sacrificing? Recently, I was listening to a podcast where a Navy SEAL was recounting a story of a young SEAL that served within his operation. And it was a young man by the name of Michael Mansour. Michael was posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in 2008, and this was said at his ceremony. On St. Michael's Day, September 29th, 2006, Michael Mansour would make the ultimate sacrifice. Mike and two teammates, they had taken position on the outcropping of a rooftop when an insurgent grenade bounced off of Mike's chest and it landed on the roof. Mike had a clear chance to escape, but he realized that the other two SEALs, his friends, did not. In that terrible moment, he had two options: to save himself or to save his friends. For Mike, this was no choice at all. He threw himself onto the grenade and he absorbed the blast with his body. One of the survivors said it this way: Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, "You cannot take my brothers. I will go in their stead." This is what true friendship looks like. And the reason we know it is because John 15:13 tells us that greater love has no one than this, that someone would lay down their life for their friends. Jesus Christ is the epitome, the standard, the model of true friendship, in that he has sacrificed himself for you and for me. Jesus knows why friendship matters. Like, all of us were enemies of God at one time, and yet Jesus, the true love of God extended to us in friendship, moved towards those that did not deserve his friendship at all. He moved towards not people that he found compatibility with, but people that he found enmity with. And yet he said, I love you still anyway. I have ahava. I have a invisible affection that leads to a visible action, an action that tells us how friendship is built. That friendship with God is built by the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. That Jesus, he looked upon you knowing full well, you can't do it. It's not possible for you to be perfect, to fulfill the commandment, to uphold the law. You cannot become what God intended for you to become. All have sinned and fallen short of his glory, and the wages of that sin is death. But you know what? I can do it. I can do what all humanity cannot. I can be perfect in your place. But I will not only build your friendship with God through my perfection and lifelong, and I will also build your friendship by laying my life aside and dying the death you deserve. And so badly do I want for your friendship to my Father that not only will I lay my life down, but I will take my life up again. And I will ascend to the Father and rise from the grave, that any who look to me and say, that's my Lord, that's my King, that's my friend, might rise with me as well. And the beauty of the gospel is it tells us, as we look upon the life of Jesus, what friendship does look like. For by befriending us, he has shown us how we ought to befriend each other. Do you know Jesus? There is no friend like he. Do you have friends? Do you look like him? He has given you a path to eternal joy. It's found in the one that sits above you, and remarkably, it's found in the ones that sit beside you. Let me pray for us. Father, we love you. So grateful, God, for this time, this chance to sit under your word. God, I pray for my friends. There are some here tonight, God, that do not know you, that cannot experience true friendship with their peers until they embrace true friendship from Jesus. There are others, God, here that are looking for a friend. And they feel like, man, I've lost my friends. I can't find my friends. I've tried, but I don't know what to do next. And what those friends, God, need to do is they need to join a church. They need to get involved here. They may even need to serve with us on Tuesdays. And then, God, there are some people here that need to repent because they've just been a bad friend. I pray, Jesus, that as we look to your example, we might find an example to follow. It is in Christ's name we pray. Amen.